So this video is going to be on the purpose of people like priests, monks, I guess you could say even doctors and scientists. And it's kind of like it is the medium by which you're going to talk to God, or the medium by which you're going to listen to truth, right? So imagine two people in a conversation, and this scales all the way up. So we'll start with the most immediate of like two people. You're in a relationship, and so there's a dialogue back and forth, and you're coming up with ideas and goals, and you each have this, because you're in the relationship, you're looking at what the other person is doing, but it's hard for you to see what you are both doing, right? So you could get into a conflict or an argument, and this third person is there, and they go, oh, see, you're doing this and you're doing this, and the perspective of that person tends to help the relationship. So this outside perspective, this disembodied perspective. And so for that perspective to be healthy and to not make the situation or the confusion worse, the person giving voice to that outer perspective, that detached, disassociated perspective of somebody not participating in the drama, it needs to come from somebody who's actually not participating in the drama that you're seeking advice on. So with like relationship stuff, you can usually get advice from a friend, and that's enough of a perspective. If you try and go, this is what we are doing and we need to stop this, right? So if the person in the relationship tries to act as the disembodied vantage point that knows what you are doing as a relationship, that we position, if the person in the relationship takes that perspective, it's not actually that perspective. It's this person inflating themselves to take that perspective, and there's no way to avoid that. So anytime when you're having a we relationship, the person takes the disembodied vantage point of like, oh, this is what is actually happening. Like they take that position of power. It causes just a massive inflation. So that's and you have to kind of like know what's going on. It's almost like bodybuilding. Like if somebody's genuinely taking that position all the time, they get, some sort of massive ego growth. And that's what happens with therapy speak, spiritual dialogue and stuff like that. People, or if you're a scientist, people will learn, like, what's the scientist supposed to be? They're supposed to be a disassociated perspective that sees the world how it truly is, right? That's what the scientist is supposed to be. That's what you're going to the scientist for. When they go follow the science, you go, we're listening to this detached we perspective. And so that's why the scientist follows these rules of detachment, and they try not to be invested in the dramas of the world, right? This is the same thing as a priest. So like if let's say you're wanting counseling on family stuff, on friend stuff, relational stuff. These are these giant networks of relationships. And so if you want an outside perspective that doesn't inflate somebody within the relationship, you have to go to somebody who is not participating in that game. And so the priest is supposed to have, practiced this particular level of detachment, a monk even more so. And these perspectives, these outside perspectives, and by saying, oh, I'm not going to participate in this game, it's only once you've stopped participating can you give voice to the transcendent. Otherwise, any time that you give voice to it, there's this massive ego inflation, which is what I'm doing that intentionally to kind of show this is always happening no matter what. Anytime that you see somebody taking the transcendent perspective yet still participating, it's not the transcendent perspective, even if they say the transcendent perspective perfectly. It's ego inflation. And so you just, instead of seeing the we vantage point, this individual's vantage point within the drama becomes more powerful. And so anybody taking these detached vantage points, like be they spiritual, scientific, or otherwise, and is still playing the game or is still attached, is accumulating power, no matter if it looks violent or if it's Mr. Nice Guy. And you'll see that people who become highly spiritual and are still playing the game just become twisted. Like it could become, you could see everything from Satanism and Luciferianism and dark stuff as the eye is spiritually inflated and they continue to play the game, or they're still attached. And you can also see it, that's where you get the hyper niceties, like hyper agreeableness, that hyper, like the personality is like sort of washed of conflict because their eye has inflated to encompass everybody in this spiritual understanding. And in some sense, that's like the most. It's like the most toxic because it's like it's such a perfected evil. You would never. There's nothing to criticize. It's actually fully good, other than the person has like given up their soul for it, sort of. Right. So that's the almost. I think in Orthodoxy they used to say that the lower sins are better and safer and everything. If you're going to be doing something, the overtly like bad stuff is all. You could almost say that it's better because you at least know it. It's like you can't obtain perfection in it. Whereas like if you have these attachments of social standing or pride or stuff like that, and you play the game right, you can have this like absolutely perfected image, and you'll never have a single reason to change it other than like sort of this internal misery. So that's the point of having a priest and a religion and a shaman and a doctor, is to give you that we perspective. Like, what's a doctor? A doctor is almost like you have an illness, and the illness is all of your cells working together. So you have to get another outside group of cells to say, hey, this is what's going on. That's why it's hard to heal yourself. You need a detached, disassociated perspective. And if the person hasn't detached, not disassociated, but detached, they're literally opposites. Disassociation is like a withdrawal from reality, and an attachment is actually a relaxing into it and an accepting of it. Like a doctor is that detached perspective for your body, so you can see like, oh, this is how the cells are communicating poorly. And then also, yeah, like, you know, the priest, people that have taken these vows, right? They take these vows to like to detach from various worldly things, and that allows them to give voice to your situation without muddling it up or causing a worse thing. Because if they're in your let's say that they're in your relationship, they're in your network of people, they have not detached from the problem that you're seeking, right? This is what happens if you go to a priest or a doctor or a scientist or whatever who has not detached from the arena within which their answer is speaking on or influencing. This is why politics and science is bad and stuff like that. If a person is correct, if they have not detached, if they have not taken their vows of abstinence from the problem, their answer, even if it's correct, will cause a diminishing or it'll cause a weakening of everybody else in the game, because they will become more powerful. So the people with less understanding than them in the relationship energetically become weaker. There's no way for that to happen. But if the person is detached, you have the network happening, and this person is outside the network, and he can speak and say, this is what the network is doing, without influencing the dynamic and the power levels of anything in the network. So then they can talk on it accurately. So this is like what a good coach is doing, like where they know you need that outside perspective, because it'll hurt the system if anybody in the system takes the perspective. It's not that they can't. It's not like anybody can't, but this is why you need these positions in society, and why their vows of abstinence and detachment from the question itself is essential, because otherwise the answers are always destructive. And it'll either be through these little things like the subtle like pride and vainglory, or it'll be in scientific advice tainted by political stuff, tainted by the pursuit of fame. It'll be religious shepherding tainted by, you know, different like worldly ideologies, worldly beliefs that you're not supposed to have, that you're not supposed to participate in. It'll always cause, you know, varying degrees of these problems. So it's like these positions in society are people who their primary purpose is not their knowledge, but it's their detachment, so that they're able to help the network that they're trying to do their service to without like screwing it up. And then that's true in like just about every activity. That can go a lot of different ways, but it's most relevant with somebody like a priest or a monk. So you can go to a monk with these big problems in life, and their answer, if they've detached from the question, is usually incredibly insightful, profound, and healing for everybody involved. If they have not detached, then their answer will usually, you know, cause you or other people in the system some sort of problem, like a derangement. Somebody will be hurt or diminished or inflated, or it'll just usually in the long run you'll see that it wasn't a detached vantage point. So the energy from it wasn't actually going in the direction of a true question. It was the problem amplifying itself, or the problem kind of moving. If that makes any sense. Probably. I mean, it probably makes sense. It's pretty basic, right? So that's just why you need priests or scientists. And if you don't have that, if you don't have those, right? Like politicians are supposed to be detached from money. They're supposed to be detached from fame, right? They're supposed to be detached, where it doesn't influence them. Detached from addictions to various substances, or detached from any sort of lie.